So hello and welcome to the Men's Therapy Directory podcast. I'm talking today with Rob Ashe, and he is a licensed marriage and family therapist in the San Francisco Bay Area. Today we're going to be talking about men's therapy in general, and also this is being recorded during the COVID-19 crisis quarantine, so we may be talking about that as well. So Rob Ashe, thanks for joining me today. It's great to see you. And I guess let's get started by talking a little bit about men's therapy, what kind of sort of ideas you have about maybe barriers to therapy, how men traditionally have been a little resistant to therapy. And so we'll start with that just to kick things off.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Michael. Yeah, and one place I think it's interesting to start that maybe most people don't realize is that just in terms of therapists in general, it's mostly a women-dominated field.
Yeah.
And being a male therapist, even in that regard, we're kind of a little bit in the minority, not a vast majority, but a little bit. And so how that relates to potential uh, potential people wanting to come in to have therapy, that being men, there are barriers in the sense of that, therapy in general is just commonly perceived as a place where emotions need to be emoted. There's vulnerability and all these words that we hear.
Yeah.
And just generally speaking, myself growing up as a young boy, we were all inculcated with a lot of messages growing up, don't cry, be a man, and those things get in there. And we form our vision of ourselves or our view of ourselves based on those models. And unfortunately, those models sustain as we move through our lives and we get more and more closed off. And what can happen is that we start not trusting ourselves in the sense of we don't trust our emotions, which we all have, men, women, there is no exception. And by closing off that valve, so to speak, of emotion and trying to diminish it and shut it down, we're really losing a very valuable opportunity to understand ourselves and how we can be in the world and be comfortable, and how we can communicate with others in a way that's really more full and more whole as a human being, basically. So, and I think men now in the world we live in right now, if I can just kind of take this
Sure.
a step further, is that the world is actually, as we've seen in the last few years, the world is changing very dramatically in terms of gender roles. And men right now are at a very interesting time that, on the one hand, we see that we're kind of on our heels because even men who are, I would say, are very progressive and of course want equal rights for, want gender equality for all people at the same time, still feel that somehow we're getting pigeonholed as the quote unquote men who is insensitive and doesn't understand things. And from that, we're trying to navigate how we can how we can be in the world, how we can be men in the world, but at the same time show that, wait a minute, we do have sensitivities, we do have vulnerabilities, and that needs to be developed at the same time, though. And I think that part of our, generally speaking, that is an underdeveloped area of being a male in our society right now. And so part of just round this particular part out by saying, and that part of the role of therapy, I think, for men is really developing this, I would call a muscle, this emotional muscle that's kind of underdeveloped. into something that really kind of that we can develop into something that can be very useful as a human being.
Yeah, I love the way you put that, like it's a muscle to develop, an emotional muscle, because if you think, well, like you were saying, everyone has emotions. And the fact that if you suppress these in some way, or um, fool yourself into saying, I need to be tough, I need to be strong, vulnerability, you hear that's a buzzword, right?
Right.
I'm not vulnerable, I'm weak. All of these things, um, to close off the emotional part, if you're a man, of that part of you is very limiting. And I really love the way you put it. It's like a muscle that can be developed, because I don't know about you, but seeing men in therapy, oftentimes I may see, say, like men are referred maybe by their significant other, or maybe be a little resistant to it. And but once they get into therapy and start developing these emotional qualities and exploring them, they realize it actually adds strength to their overall
Right.
life experience.
Right.
Right. So it's not like, oh, if I'm start talking about difficult things, if I'm vulnerable with my therapist, I'm going to be weaker, or my life's going to be diminished. In fact, it's the absolute opposite. That it's a richer, fuller experience to tap into those emotions, and to be frank, like a lot of I think men, when they go into therapy, are scared of revealing some of those emotions. So it actually makes you stronger and more courageous when you face those difficult emotions. You're no longer really afraid of them. So in terms of like therapy making you, like more of a man, right, or making you stronger,
Right.
like it is like weightlifting, or like if you go into the gym and you want to develop a certain part of your body, at first it hurts, right?
Right.
And then afterwards you're just so satisfied. So I like the way you put that, as like building a muscle. Um, so Rob, let me ask you, in terms of your work with men, do you see any kind of a theme, just in general, when say when men maybe first get started working with you? Is there like a common thread you've seen? Maybe there isn't. I don't know. I'm just wondering if you see anything like a common theme.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. And I do want to be careful because I am kind of speaking more broadly. But I
Yeah.
would say, yeah, a common theme is that when we're talking about our emotions, this word called emotions,
Mhm.
I find that many men feel that using logic and using kind of a linear way of problem solving, which is valuable. I don't want to diminish that. The intellect and the way we solve problems using our deductive reasoning and logic is very valuable in the world. There's no question about that. But when it comes to emotions, it's actually very limited. It can't do the job, frankly. And so I noticed that many men that come in, when we start talking, when I start, for example, connecting with them and saying, "Oh, what are you feeling? What's going on? What kind of emotions are coming up for you in this moment?" I really can sense many times that men get locked up because I can just really get this sense that there's this part of them that's saying, "Well, wait a minute. Let me answer this question that Rob is posing me with a logical from a logical framework or from an intellectual framework." And it kind of can create a paralyzing effect, and they get locked up because, again, that part of how we process things is just not the way to understand what's going on for us emotionally. And so my experience with men is that that seems to be the initial barrier to sort out with men and to talk about, and to really kind of take really a giant step back and say, look, just kind of what I was just saying, that this skill you have, your intelligence and logic, work in many aspects. It works in business. It works in balancing your checkbook. Um, it works in terms of being prompt to meet friends out and so forth. But in terms of the infinite complexity of what our emotions are telling us, and love, and how we feel about things, again, it's not capable of making sense of those things. So I find a lot of the first several sessions with men is really more about helping that person gain an understanding of how the emotional complexity that men are coming in for, even they might not even be aware that they're coming in for that, but what they're coming in for, um, there needs to be there needs to be a shift. There needs to be a redirection in how they're approaching some of the problems they're coming in for, and understanding that the way that you think you're going to go about mitigating or resolving some of the emotional rupture and um, and disruption that you're experiencing in your life can't be resolved through intellectual or logical means, and that seems to be a common theme. And so that's kind of seems to be the initial part of the work. Is like, it's like, look, this is going to take another approach. It's going to take another way for you to look at how you process things and how you're looking at your emotions, and how you're understanding yourself.
Yeah, that's just so well put. And in fact, that's been similar experience in working with men. Is that we are, I don't know, it's probably part biological, part socialization, a lot of factors, but make men think more linearly and logically, like you say. Not that women don't do that as well, but it is. I think it's true. It's one of these barriers of trying out this new approach of trusting, um, and the nonlinear kind of approach to. I'll
Right.
just call it problem solving, because you go into therapy to solve a problem. Pretty
Right.
much
Right.
right. To just boil it down, and trusting that process of exploring the emotions. And I think for a lot of men, it's kind of this fear of like uncharted territory. How will this solve my problem? If I start talking about these difficult feelings and emotions that I have that are keeping me from, solving my problem, how is this going to actually solve my problem? Because all my life I've done it one way. I've done it
Hmm.
more logically, more linearly. Um, that's the way it's done, right? But the
Yeah.
value of therapy, like you say, is you're in this safe space with another therapist, and you can explore those sort of uncharted waters.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would agree that that's kind of like the theme, that difference between the logical thinking and the more emotionally informed thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I would just add to that, there's a word that we use. It's called intuition,
Uh-huh.
and to really trust our intuition.
Yeah.
And in the sense that, again, by just, we have this intellectual part that we do a lot of problem solving. And
Mhm.
the intuition is, quite frankly, we call it maybe a gut instinct.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure anybody who's going to watch this, or anybody who I would talk to, would have had many moments where you have a gut reaction to something. You're faced with a problem that's not linear, faced with a problem, and you're wrenching over it, and you're trying to figure it out. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, wait, that's it. That's what it was. And and so that moment when you have that realization, like, in terms of saying, oh, that's what I need to do, that is your intuition at work. And that's that nonlinear part, that nonlinear aspect of how we perceive things and how we understand things, that really needs to be magnified and accentuated so we can really attain balance and understanding of that emotional part of our life.
Yeah, I think it's also, in terms of historically, men maybe before they went to therapy may tap into that intuition by you've heard the saying, just sleep on that, right? So if you have a difficult
Right.
decision or problem and you
Yeah.
sleep on it, instead of I must figure this out today, it's amazing what that can do, of just having everything sort of synthesized, emotionally, intellectually, and then you may have the answer the next day, or when you're in the shower, right? Like it comes to you, right?
Right.
So just the power of of intuition, which is this sort of this. I mean, my own personal definition is that it's sort of a culmination or a synthesis of emotional, being informed emotionally, intellectually, perceptually, everything coming together. So I think, like we're talking about, there's this huge value for men to develop and explore the emotional side of them and
Right.
to be vulnerable. And by that, I mean not like a buzzword, but like vulnerable meaning, hey, I don't know. Like this is an area that needs to be developed. I'm willing to trust the process of therapy. Being
Right.
vulnerable that way can be
Yeah.
really powerful for men.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if I could just add to that a little bit, just we have this expression that we've heard all the time: figure it out. This
Uh-huh.
idea of figuring it out.
Yeah.
And so, of course, very connected to this intellectual aspect of how we process things.
Right.
And so, the power of the intuition, where what happens with a lot of men I see, especially in the initial stages, is I'll even kind of say very bluntly and directly, stop trying to figure it out. In other words, stop trying to figure out in that classic traditional way. And if you stop doing that, you will surprise yourself that by
Mm-hmm.
stopping this aspect of figuring it out, that this intuitive aspect of wisdom and understanding that's inside of you, that's inside all of us, will actually take care of it. And it'll show itself to you and allow you to understand what it is you're trying to, quote unquote, figure out.
Right. Right.
But that aspect of letting go, which again, because we're talking about the aspect of men in therapy, that's something that a lot of men, I should say, struggle with,
Yeah.
is letting go of the figuring it out aspect.
Right. Right. I think that is can be threatening for men. Just the whole
Yeah.
phrase "let it go." Just like, wait, I don't want to let go of control. But maybe perhaps a way to reframe that is you're not letting go. You're simply trying another template or trying another method, right? So you can
Right.
always. I
Yeah.
mean, when men go to therapy, they shouldn't be asked to get rid of their logical thinking and get rid of their standard method
Great
of
point.
figuring things out, because it works a lot of the time, but unfortunately there's sometimes when that doesn't work. So um, I think there's some sort of verbiage and labels that can be like a barrier for men in therapy, because
Hmm.
you hear, be vulnerable, let go, these kinds of things. And if they're not really explained properly, men can see that as a, kind of copping out or not being true to themselves. But what you're saying about letting go is maybe putting this other methodology of your intellect and logic off to the side for a second, right? You don't have to
Hmm.
let it go, but let's explore this other thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
appreciate the readjustment of that. That's a great point, and something I talk about a lot. It's certainly not a. I mean, I want to be super clear. Not a putting down of the intellect. The intellect is beautiful. It is essential. And so I would just maybe rephrase that and say it's an integration of the
yeah,
intellect with this, what we're calling our intuition, and
right,
having both sides of this way of how we process things kind of work in harmony
yeah.
together in a way
I
that,
love the way you put that. Yeah, integration and harmony, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
nice,
And
nice.
so with and so I guess maybe what I'm saying, and maybe what you're implying is also in a way, is that there's a little bit of things are a little bit out of whack. I notice sometimes in men, where the intellect is up here and the intuitive part's way down here, and
Yeah,
so to kind of really just kind of bring things where there's
uh-huh.
this kind of like pendulation between the
Right.
intellect and the intuition, where there is this kind of harmonic way that we're operating, which by the way, I just want to add one more thing, is that not only can we understand things more clearly, but no small thing, it feels good when we start operating that way, which
Right.
is part of therapy too. Feeling good, feeling content, feeling happy. So when we arrive at that place or arriving at that place, it actually feels really good. And um, and so
That's a great point, Rob. Thank you for saying that, because I mean, I find myself falling into this logic problem solving thing. Like, therapy is you coming in to solve a problem, but you're also pointing out that what you can get out of therapy is just simply feeling good or feeling better,
right,
right?
right.
So thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, I want to shift gears right now and talk just a little more specifically about right now what's happening in the world with the quarantine and the
Hmm.
COVID-19.
Yeah,
And we're recording this at the beginning of May. So there are some states in the United States that are sort of transitioning back to a little bit of normalcy. But at the same time, there's a lot of challenges for men in particular roles in their lives. And I think, at least from what I've seen, and even for myself a little bit too, the challenge of uh, you know figuring it out, like you say, or I've got to figure this out by myself. All of these challenges, so financial challenges right now, being sheltered in place at home, and managing relationships, your health, things like that. I wonder if you could speak to just some ideas about ways men can handle the quarantine situation right now. Things they can do maybe for a couple things, like maybe for self-care, and then also ways to self-talk in terms of how they can, what should we say, maybe not blame themselves, or uh, approach this crisis in a way that's empowering to them and not maybe self-critical.
yeah. Good,
Yeah.
great question. Well, I mean, because this is a very unique situation, is very unprecedented. And right now we're all stuck at home and it's hard to really, when we're pre-quarantine, which is basically our entire lives until the last 3 months, we've had this convenient, separation of we go to work, we leave our house, we come home, we have all these little breaks that are very cleanly delineated, logistically delineated. Now all of a sudden we're at home all the time. And in a way, we have to create these ways of creating some kind of separation or delineation, for
Yeah.
lack of a better word, in the context of our homes. One thing I've been suggesting to many male clients, and actually even some female clients as well, is what I'm calling, and maybe I'm not the first one to call it this, but I'm calling them micro moments.
Mm.
And and what that means is that we're all, even when we're at home, we're maybe still working, or if even if we're not working, we're trying to find ways to be productive. And the word productive, what I've discovered, much more with much more intensity in terms of after this quarantine has started, is that it's a very loaded word, because productivity implies that, well, I have to be doing something to further my life, something that's going to propel me forward. And of course, the real problem we have with that is that if you're stuck at home, it's kind of hard to do that, especially unfortunately if you lose your job or something really catastrophic like that. And so with a micro moment, what I'm suggesting to people is actually, it might sound kind of bizarre, it might sound counterintuitive, is to give yourself a moment, really literally a moment, to be unproductive. And so to find, and actually I've discovered this with myself because, Michael, I assume you, like me, we're experiencing the same things our clients are experiencing. And so I discovered a couple of months ago that I needed some time to separate myself from this idea that I need to be doing something all the time. And so I found myself going to sit in a chair for whether it's 5 or 10 minutes, looking out at the sky, watching the clouds go by, and giving myself permission to not be productive and just give myself a breather. And actually, really kind of a quasi meditation or a full meditation, whatever, it depends on who the individual is, and just allow myself to unplug, and create that separation from this pull we have towards being productive. And I did that several times during a day. It could be 6, 7, 8 times during a day, finding 5, 10 minutes, whatever period of time feels appropriate to you without a stopwatch, to give yourself time to say, you know what, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to put my cell phone aside. I'm going to put my computer aside, and I'm just going to be human for a minute and just
Nice.
allow myself to really slow down. And I think that's been very helpful for a lot of people, to give themselves that permission to slow down in that way.
Yeah, I love that. That's great, because like what you're saying is that normally we're used to these sort of structural imposed breaks, right? Come home from work, unwind, relax. But now people are working at home, or if they're looking for employment, it's almost like you feel this pull to be, like you say, productive from the moment you wake up until maybe even late at night, solving all these problems and
Right.
things. So I love that, where you're actually creating structure for yourself to take these micro breaks, even a couple during the day. And I think what's maybe even counterintuitive is, or ironic, is like if you do this, if you be unproductive, it will actually recharge your batteries in a way that will make you more productive, maybe the next day, right?
Well, Michael, you just stole my thunder.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah, well, I
couldn't agree
could.
more. No, I'm just kidding. I mean,
Yeah,
but really, that was in absolutely. You're on target,
yeah,
and I speak to that, and that's absolutely that's the surprise, quote unquote, surprising thing that can happen, is that
yeah,
you do recharge, and by taking this, creating space, basically, when you have these micro moments, you're creating a little bit of space, and where your thoughts slow down. All of a sudden, what clients have been reporting to me, male clients have been reporting to me, is that, geez, Rob, I notice that when I do these micro moments, I'm having these creative ideas that pop up,
hmm,
because I'm actually giving myself permission to not be grinding and thinking, and excessively thinking, by the way, which can happen a lot. And all of a sudden, by this kind of goes back to what we were talking about originally, about our intuition, by giving ourselves that space to just to breathe, maybe think about things we're grateful for, and just relax. All of a sudden, thoughts starting to emerge, new ideas, and people have found that that can be actually very productive.
yeah.
So, and again, going to your point, can actually absolutely recharge our batteries and give people more energy to re-engage once they're done in these micro moment periods. Once they're ready to stop, to end that moment,
Yeah.
they find themselves more re-engaged with the thing were that they want to start and get back into again.
So true. And I think it is hard for men, well, for a lot of people in general, to be unproductive like that. But I think what happens is this, if we understand brain science, to get a little nerdy here, is that when
Yeah,
you're getting out of that sort of myopia, if you will, of focusing on the details and the problem solving, trusting your brain and your body and your biochemistry, that when you do take those meditative breaks, and there's science on studying the brains of monks and all this kind of stuff, is
sure.
that there's different processes happen when you do take that break and give yourself, like you say, permission to do that. Trust your subconscious, trust this amazing brain and heart and emotions and everything that's working in synergy, and to just take that break, and things coalesce, and the solutions and will come, and trusting that. I think that's hard, especially for men, to trust that process. It's almost seen like downtime, like I'm being weak by taking a break, but when in fact you're trusting your brain and body to kick in, and you See what I mean by that? Is like trying
Oh,
to sell it to men that yes, taking breaks is actually really good for you.
oh, absolutely. You said that really well. I don't have too much more to add to that, but really it is that, kind of just similar to what you're saying is that there's this constantly 24/7, this unconscious process that's going on with all of us, even when we dream. There's this engine that's constantly going. And And by taking that break, you really clear that space so that you're allowing all these maybe submerged thoughts that are going on to actually surface so they can actually become conscious. And there's things you can be aware of and give you those so-called aha moments.
Right.
And
Right.
I've heard a lot of clients when I see them in one week and they come back the next week or a couple of weeks later, they do come back and talk about how they've really had these jumps in terms of things that they've been struggling with. Even in the midst of a day, they're struggling with an issue, and they give themselves these breaks, and all of a sudden they're taking this micro moment, and all of a sudden the issue that they were wrenching over and struggling over, all of a sudden becomes, ah, that's what I was. That was the answer. That's what I was looking for. So using that word trust again, trusting in ourselves, trusting in our emotion, trusting in our intuition is so essential to growing as a human being that I can't even overstate it. And I think that's part of the premise and also what you spoke to as well. So, yeah.
Very well put. Very well put. Um, so, Rob, I think we're going to wrap things up. I think what you said today about just the power of therapy, the power of trusting emotions, for men exploring that territory, how it's a strength. It's like building a muscle. These are great messages for all men out there who are maybe thinking about therapy. Um, I think it's definitely worth trying. And where can people find you, say online, if they want to find out more about your practice?
Well, my website is robashetherapy.com, and that's ROBASHE
Uh-huh.
therapy.com. And the men's therapy directory,
Uh-huh.
I'm on there as well.
Great.
And I'm also on Psychology Today. I have a little bio on Psychology Today as well.
Okay.
So those three places you can find me in the Bay Area.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Rob Ashe. Wonderful conversation today. I've known you for a couple of years, and it's great to catch up with you virtually here
Yeah.
via video. So for all the men out there, check out some therapy if you need it. It's okay. It's not that scary. It's like building a muscle. So thanks everyone for watching. Everyone be well. Take care.
Thank you, Michael.
Welcome.